Hello there, you're watching The Press Preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. So it's time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's chief political correspondent, Jessica Elgot, and The Sun's political editor, Harry Cole. So a very good evening to both of you, and I'm very pleased to say that you will be with us through until just before midnight. So thanks for joining us. Let's take a look then, first of all, at what's on the front pages. And The Eye says that thousands of British families have already signed up to host refugees after the announcement of a government scheme. The Sun leads with the same story, saying 43,000 Brits have offered to take in refugees. The Daily Mail also leads with that story, saying caring Britons rush to join new scheme. 3 Brits killed in missile hell is the headline for the Daily Mirror as they report on the Polish border strike over the weekend. And The Guardian also looks at the developing situation in Ukraine. Their headline, Russia's deadly raids plunge Ukrainians into nightmare. China has signalled willingness to provide Russia with military support, says US. That's the front of the Financial Times. That's their main headline. The Daily Telegraph reports on comments made by Boris Johnson about the West's dependence on Russian oil and gas. Their headline, West made terrible mistake with Putin, says PM. And the Metro leads on the protesters who stormed the home of a Russian oligarch in London. Their headline, You're Putin us up, mate. I'm going to practice that and do it better next hour. And just a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages of tomorrow's papers for yourself while you watch us. So let's bring in then journalist Jessica Elgot and Harry Cole. Good to see you both. Jessica, a number of the front pages lead with this new government scheme encouraging people to offer rooms in their houses to Ukrainian refugees. Let's start with The Sun. They say UK reign, Ukraine there on their front page.
Yeah, and it really is. I mean, just for a week of what has been particularly grim news, and of course this comes on the back of such a terrible crisis, but it is heartwarming, ultimately heartwarming, to see how many tens of thousands of people, and that's only in the first hours of this scheme, are prepared to essentially offer up their homes for Ukrainian refugees to come live with them, people they haven't met, people who don't have a connection to the UK. That's actually, people with a separate scheme. And, this is no small endeavour. It's offering a space in your house for a minimum of 6 months, as Michael Gove set out today. And people have embraced that. Cabinet ministers have embraced that. Grant Shapps said he would be offering one, and so did the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. I know also of another Labour Shadow Minister who says he'll be doing it as well. So, I think that there are probably some, when you look at the detail of the scheme, probably some criticisms you could make of it. I think there are, difficulties logistically, but on the face of it, it's a phenomenal achievement to have so many people come forward.
Well, that's right, and makes the front page of the Daily Mail as well. Harry, it's also on the front of the Eye, these extraordinary numbers. I think the website did crash because of so many people coming forward to put themselves up for this, which is incredibly heartening, isn't it? I mean, do you feel this is the answer for housing refugees? Do you think it's right that the public take responsibility here?
Well, I don't think the government really had any choice, if you're going to be slightly cynical about it. And I'm just said exactly what I feel. It is heartwarming after 2-3 weeks of horrific news. And government insiders late last week were saying, look, just wait. We're getting it in the neck now because we're not taking, we haven't just thrown open our borders. We're balancing the security of the country versus the capacity of what we can do. But just wait, because I think they knew this would work. Michael Gove, in particular, Downing Street, were very clear. They wanted to get us off they wanted this scheme to land correctly, for it to be up and running properly before they opened it up, because they knew actually the goodness of the British people would probably throw open their doors. Now, scratch beneath the surface a bit, and you've got a realization that actually, because of the large amount of asylum claims we have from the Channel, because of influxes of genuine refugees and asylum seekers from conflicts in Syria, in Libya, in Afghanistan, the British housing stock, local town halls housing stock is pretty much saturated. We're spending £1.5 million every single day, roughly, give or take, on hotels for asylum seekers who want to come to this country while their claims are being processed, because there's not enough flats or houses to put them up in. Now, what do you do in a situation like that when there's a possibility of another possibly hundreds of thousands of people from Ukraine desperately needing shelter? You have to open up that massive spare housing capacity that Britain has. And if they pull this off, I genuinely think this will go down in modern political history as an incredible move, because you've taken an actual real headache problem that this country has, is that town councils just don't have enough rooms to shelter people, and blown open another problem in Britain, which is lots of people are sitting on lots of spare capacity in their private homes. And if you can make that work, that's a great public policy.
A very quick word on how this was announced, Jessica. It was announced by Michael Gove. Was that a surprise? Did you think this should be Priti Patel who was announcing the scheme?
I think we knew from late last week that Michael Gove was going to sort of take the reins on this, and if you're going to be quite generous as to why, you might say, well, a lot of this involves close liaison with local governments. A lot of the people coming over are people who are women and children. They're probably likely to need more support than people who could just come over here and start working immediately without having dependents to worry about. Lots of them will have partners, husbands, boyfriends fighting in Ukraine. A lot of them will have small children, or they might be elderly, and therefore they're likely to need quite a lot of local council support. I think that's one of the things that councils are kind of slightly on edge about how much support they will get, and then the government has announced some. And so, yeah, you can understand kind of why it's Michael Gove announcing this, but, cruelly speaking, some people in government will say he was the person to grip this rather than Priti Patel.
Let's move on to one of the other topics inevitably being covered by the papers, Harry, and that's what's going on the ground in Ukraine as the bombardments continue. The Guardian has made that their main headline. Russia's deadly raids plunge Ukrainians into nightmare. And there are some horrific statistics in this article, aren't there?
Yeah, the first 2.5 weeks of this conflict, the Ukrainians' armed forces have put up a phenomenal resistance. They are, armed with Western weapons. They really have stopped Putin's war machine in its tracks. However, it is at the end of the day going to be a numbers game, and the overwhelming force that Putin has is sort of speaking to defense sources and sort of wiser hands, sort of late last week when everyone was thinking, oh my God, they could actually turn the tide here, was pleading caution because, yes, while the Russians have sustained huge losses, that war machine just will keep on coming. And if you have a conscript army and you're not, worried about the scale of losses, you are just going to keep pushing and keep pushing. And I fear we're starting now in the last 3 or 4 days actually to see the grim reality of that yes, resistance can only go so far, but if you're up against might force, you are going to eventually see these devastating scenes. And it's becoming increasingly clear that in his frustrations, that his efforts to conquer Ukraine have not gone as efficiently as planned. We're seeing a much more blunter instrument of force in the widespread shelling and flattening of hospitals, maternity hospitals, a mosque over the weekend, pretty indiscriminate action. And the people that sort of Jess and I speak to and are briefing us are definitely saying, look, this is going to get a lot grimmer very quickly.
Well, yes, and it quotes the Red Cross saying that the number of who have fled the country is around 3 million now, and conditions for those left behind were, they say, nothing short of a nightmare. Jessica, let's move on to the Daily Telegraph, though, because the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has written for the paper tomorrow morning, talking about, well, the headline says it, West made terrible mistake with Putin, but also talking about the implications of cutting some of the ties with Russia, not least energy supplies.
Yes, and he likens Vladimir Putin's use of Russian energy supplies to blackmail, and says simply that the West cannot go on with this kind of reliance. And he essentially argues that banning imports of Russian hydrocarbons will be the final thing that starves the Russian president, and he doesn't say this, but ultimately the Russian people of money. But he also talks about a very painful period of adjustment. And one of the things that he makes quite clear in the piece is that he's still he still is committed to the net zero target, and it has to, and the UK has to become a net zero emitter by 2050, is essentially saying that the drive towards renewable energy isn't the problem here. But as Harry's piece points out, that doesn't necessarily, you are going to see this government make some choices that people, the environmentalists, aren't going to be that happy with. Whether that's delaying the closure of coal plants, as Harry's reporting tonight.
Well, yes. So, Harry, let's go to your article inside The Sun tomorrow morning. A lot of concern, obviously, about about if we cut off Russian supplies, what that does to global prices. And already we've seen prices going up hugely. They were going up before the invasion of Ukraine. So what have you found out about what Rishi Sunak might do to try and alleviate some of the pain?
Well, the governor faced with a bit of a headache because next week they've got a mini budget, which for months and months is meant to be sort of Rishi Sunak sort of, I fixed the economy after COVID, bit of a victory lap. But this is now fast turning into a what the hell do we do to tackle this soaring costs at the pumps? Now, another record day on Sunday for both diesel and petrol. Now, the price of crude is fluctuating, but experts are telling the Treasury Committee in the House of Commons today that we're expecting 18 months of fluctuations, and the general trend for oil prices is going to go up. The Prime Minister touches on this quite euphemistically in his piece, saying there's going to be months of pain, but that months of pain actually means people not being able to afford to go to work, parents not being able to afford to go to drive their children to school, teachers not being able to get to their jobs. It's going to be very brutal. If the cost of petrol, as is projected, could possibly do, peak at £2 a litre, the government are going to have to slash fuel duty, because at the same time as petrol is going up, their VAT take is increasing. So the Treasury are actually profiting from fuel prices being very expensive. So my feeling is the political mood, the wind is blowing towards a cut in fuel duty, which we've been campaigning for as a paper next week. France have done it, Ireland have done it, Czech Republic have done it, Portuguese have done it. Okay. I can't see how politically they get away with allowing record prices and record profits for the Treasury and expect to survive as a government meant to be on the side of the workers.